Right. Hello, and welcome to Wonkette Weekend Live Chat. I am Robin Panacchia, and this is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson.
Hi, Robin. So let's jump right into this while my wife is still listening to the chat. So obviously, this week, the New York Times had a whole kind of minor staff uprising over its really overtly anti-trans coverage. I don't think that's like a fantasy that we're having. And I think the letter that 200 contributors and staffers had signed and sent, an open letter, very explicitly detailed the kind of anti-trans bias as well as putting it into an historical context, because I think there's a perception that the Times is this crazy liberal publication and will pat itself on the back for being receptive to conservative opinion and thought, when in reality it's always sort of been, centrist at best, but when on, identity
I
politics or
mean,
social
those of
issues
us were alive
overtly.
during the Iraq War, so
Yeah. So and we can get to the paper's response. I suppose let's get to the paper's response, because I think they sort of um doubled down, defended its coverage, saying it's important, and kind of made the marginalized the aggressors. They stated that they're reporters who report on these trans issues, and despite that bias of how they report, are being harassed and bullied and threatened. And look, anyone who writes online, as we do, know what it's like to deal with creeps online. But you know, obviously, the victims here are trans people. I mean, a trans woman was murdered, not even a woman, a girl was murdered last week. And so I think underscoring that sense of victimization politics, the Times ran this op-ed from Paula Paul, who's overtly anti-trans, saying, in defense of J.K. Rowling.
just like it's
And
not a really great defense when that's who's defending you. Like,
yes, I'd mentioned on Twitter how, when people try to defend, say, like Ilhan Omar from accusations of anti-Semitism, it's usually a Jewish person saying, okay, well, she said this, but this is where I disagree, or whatever, and putting it into context. That it would be absurd for the Times to, like, say Louis Farrakhan's defense of like, that's absurd, right? Like, you
although,
would.
like, to be clear, Ilhan Omar is against the Israeli occupation of Palestine. She is not against Jewish people. There's a huge difference. It's a human rights issue. Like, it's not like it has nothing to do with anything there. Like, Israel is an also it's also an actual country, and countries can do stuff that is not great.
But she's overtly been accused of anti-Semitism, however. So, someone defending her against those accusations, as you do, um, it would help if you had a history of anti-Semitism, it would sort of fall
Yeah.
flat. Your defense, you're trying to point out that she is not doing this. So, this op-ed opens with apparent quotes from J.K. Rowling that's supposed to prove that she is not a transphobe, which is, trans people need and deserve protection. I believe the majority of trans identified people not only pose zero threat to others, but are vulnerable. I respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I feel nothing but empathy and solidarity with trans women who've been abused by men. Oh, wow. Like, I mean, it would seem that all these trans people who have an issue with her must be incredibly misguided, Robin, if obviously she's just a friend and supporter of trans people. Like, what's going on? So um in the actual article, the actual op-ed obviously undercuts all of that, because Rowling does not want to own up to being transphobic. So in the op-ed, it says, she asks, like, why do trans people claim to have an issue with Rowling, or why she's transphobic? The answer is straightforward: because she has asserted the right to spaces for biological women only, such as domestic abuse shelters and sex-segregated prisons, because she has insisted when it comes to determining a person's legal gender status, self-declared gender identity is insufficient, because she has expressed skepticism about phrases like people who menstruate in reference to biological women, because she has defended herself and, far more important, supported others, including detransitioners and feminist scholars who have come under attack from trans activists, and because she followed on Twitter and praised some of the work of Magdalene Burns, a lesbian feminist who has made incendiary comments about transgender people. So yes, she's been overtly transphobic. Like, she does inherently, she supports trans people, but does not support their right to exist, which would probably make you transphobic. How do you respond to that sort of absurd statement, like the position that Rowling has been taking, where she does not, it seems to me a clear segregationist position. Like, basically, I have no problem with Black people, but I don't want them in my neighborhoods or my schools. I don't recognize them as being in any way equal to white people, but I don't have a problem with Black people. We've been there before. That was a classic segregationist position. So, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Sorry. No, no one is, very few people ever come right out and say, I hate this group of people and wish harm upon them. No one does that. It would be, I mean, people do, but they're usually very fringe, and they don't get defenses in the New York Times unless they're being called dapper. But, most of the time, mainstream people are not going to, mainstream sexists are not going to be like, who I hate? Women. Men who wanted to have all male clubs they said, it's not that, we don't want to invite women, or we don't want to invite Jewish people, or we don't want to invite Black people. We just want a space for us. And, as long as it's not like a thing where people are networking, then it becomes a problem. But, people are allowed to have their own individual personal circles. No one is forcing anyone to hang out with anyone else. In general, what she's supposedly afraid of is, oh no, there are going to be trans women in bathrooms. There already are trans women in bathrooms. There have always been trans women in bathrooms. There have always been trans women in locker rooms. There are 85,000 other threats to women in prison that are other than trans women. And I do not see a single one of these people. I'm not that trans women are a threat, but I never see any of these people talking about prison conditions or prison rape or sexual assault otherwise. And I've been, on that forever. So yeah, none of them could give a shit unless it's a trans woman hypothetically maybe going to do it because she exists and is there.
Yes, and the sort of gender essentialism defining womanhood strictly in a very restrictive way. It seems even more dangerous because, obviously Black people have passed as white and many times, but generally speaking, when it was like, we don't want Black people in our neighborhoods or in our schools, it was like, I look Black, I present as Black. There was no sort of literal kind of demanding to see my papers type of thing, or my genitalia. I mean, I think like a trans woman was asked in at an Oklahoma Senate judiciary hearing, like, if she had a penis. Like, there's a very sort of invasiveness, because that sort of, and Rowling and others who argue that the reason for having these exclusive spaces for biological women is that inherently trans women are a threat to them, which kind of goes to a sort of a criticism of some forms of feminism that argue that men are inherently a threat to women, all men. and that's sort of essentially taking it in that road. But it just seems very dangerous. I mean, it's just sort of like, that's discrimination if I'm saying that these people are inherently more dangerous to me just based on who they are, right?
Well, they know that they're not. Like, you really don't hear anywhere near as many stories. If there were stories about, trans people going on murderous rampages, we would certainly hear about it. And yet we don't. If there were, because the conservative media would be all over it. They've been over every tiny crime that a trans person has done for like the past however many years. But we do hear a lot about, nice Christian people molesting kids, nice anti-abortion activists, getting Chris Hansen, nice responsible gun owners leaving their guns in children's bathrooms. Like, that's an actual threat. Like, generally speaking, throughout history, white women's safety has been weaponized as a way to further prejudice of any kind. And, they say that they're doing it for all women's safety, but at the end of the day, when it's, oh no, but women are going to get hurt, women are going to be, murdered, women are not going to be able to play sports, which is, also not a thing. Everyone can still play sports.
And well, Rowling benefits from that, right? So when we talk about the weaponization of white femininity, it certainly benefits that she is not, and again, I mentioned this on Twitter, she's not Rick Santorum. So when Rick Santorum was sort of saying kind of horrible things about gay people, and there's sort of a lot of backlash, it is hard for him, and I'm sure he played the victim, but it's harder for him to play the victim, to have the photo of him looking, put upon and weak and a victim of the masses, even though in Rowling's case, she's a billionaire, exceptionally powerful
who lives in a literal castle. Like, ma'am, I'm not that worried about you, okay? Like,
yes, I mean, the Times.
And she said that she's doing it for, oh my God, the poor, people on the street who don't live in castles and just want to go around saying that trans women are not women. Like, she's really just taken one on the chin for these people, these poor oppressed people, 90% of whom I believe are employed to write op-eds for British newspapers. Like, it is, and now the US, but there are a lot of them in Britain right now. Which really undermines the usual argument that, they're doing so much better than us on things. Not that we're great, but they're worse on this in certain ways, like in terms of the sheer militancy that is going on. One thing that they keep doing in a lot of these, articles about Rowling and everything is they keep trying to present it as, oh, it's feminists who are making this argument. No, it's, mostly conservatives. It's mostly, right-wing douchebags like Matt Walsh with a few J.K. Rowlings thrown in, or, trans exclusionary radical feminists. And, no one does. It's not feminists, is what I'm saying. The vast majority of feminists are not part of this team, but they keep trying to present it as this is a feminist cause. Rowling keeps trying to present it as this is a feminist cause, and it's not. It's a few specific people.
Would someone accuse you of a no true Scotsman's perhaps fallacy there, because Rowling has identified herself as a feminist, and she certainly
she is free to identify herself as a feminist. My issue is when newspapers say that they refer to the people opposing trans rights as feminists, like without any other qualifiers. Rather, they'll be like, a group of feminists, or something like, while feminists oppose this, like as a group. And that is explicitly not true. Like, she is free to, identify herself that way, because I don't really care how people identify themselves. But it's the media trying to present it as this is a feminist cause when it obviously is not.
Absolutely. I mean, certainly the challenge is she's not a Trumpist. She's actually been very, in every way, has been critical of, say, Trumpism, and except has been willing to make common cause on this one issue, which makes it seem as if perhaps she's prioritizing her transphobia more than her, previously believing Trump and people like Matt Walsh are terrible. But I think she was sort of like high-fiving with Matt Walsh on Twitter at some point.
Oh, yeah. Well, they all keep being really shocked by the fact that Matt Walsh also wants them to go back to the kitchen. It's like, no, they're not on your side, ladies. They hate you just like they hate trans people. You're just caught up in this.
The one line from the Times here about Rowling expressing skepticism about phrases like people who menstruate and reference to biological women. So
she doesn't have to use them. Other people can use them.
My point there is I think this is not what I was curious from you about, because this is not something exclusive to the right. I've seen it amongst moderate to conservative Democrats, in addition to Never Trumpers, which is that this language is distancing to normal people, quote unquote, who obviously, when you use terms like people who menstruate or people who might be pregnant and so forth, and that it's, like other slogans that shan't be named, it is counterproductive to the cause. Like, what's your take on that?
I mean, anything that includes more people is never bad. And the problem with this is that when people feel that they are in an in-group of some kind and a way that they identify, they a lot of the time dislike other people being included. For some reason, Rowling feels very importantly about womanhood being an exclusive group. I don't even think that people really notice when inclusive language is used unless someone starts yelling about it. People who menstruate is an entirely fine phrase. Women are also people. It doesn't have to be, this exclusive thing. I mean, there are also, even if you just want to talk about cisgender women, there are girls also. So, people works either way, even if you do not think that, trans men menstruate or non-binary people menstruate, which they do.
I've seen it raised here in our comments that the editorial page is obviously separate from the newsroom. However, I think I want to clarify that the letter that was sent this week is referring to the actual coverage of trans people, sort of promoting the narrative of just of that gender affirming care is this controversial issue that has suddenly just occurred, rather having been something that has been existing for a while, that there is some settled science about it, and that the Times, by elevating this question, and I put this in quotes because sort of whenever a group of people is a question, it's never good for that group of people, but they are sort of helping promote the anti-trans narrative, because specifically speaking, it's very clear that anti-trans groups, specifically among Republicans, are advancing this agenda, leveraging this fear. And that is what they were kind of going after for the Times for doing. Sorry, go ahead.
So what the Times is doing is also telling its writers to shut up and, stop criticizing their anti-trans coverage. It is very important. Everything is controversial to someone, practically everything. There is an agenda in presenting gender affirming care as controversial because it's not doctors who are saying it's a bad idea. It's not actual trans people. It's not anyone who is in fact affected or understands what it is. It is, I think with something like that, you would have to say, okay, the medical community is divided on this, but it's not. That's controversial regarding a medical practice. It's not, I'm not really sure how open heart surgery works, but that sounds gross. Um, I am not an expert. It's not controversial because I don't personally understand it, and it sounds weird and gross to me. I just picked a medical procedure. I don't really know a lot of medical procedures off the top of my head, but it's not reasonable to call it controversial in that way and to keep calling it controversial.
Yeah, and it's sort of to your point about the Times telling the writers to shut up. I mean, they had a public editor. They eliminated that position and was sort of like, okay, well, Twitter, social media, the public will keep us in check. And then once that happened, once people online would sort of speak out, or other writers at the paper would speak out, in this case, in many cases about a hostile work environment, they were told their jobs are being threatened, and they're using things like sort of an ethics guideline and just really sort of, I find, questionable employment practices, which is just that if you criticize us publicly, you can lose your job. Like, it's wrong to even politely criticize us publicly, or state us publicly, you will lose your jobs, or whatever, or essentially collectively organize against us, you can lose your jobs. And it's sort of very chilling effect in how they communicated in their response to not all of the people on that letter are trans, but a lot of their employees are trans employees who are kind of like,
hey,
this is
this
not
makes
cool.
us feel like garbage. This is the thing, yes, it's an opinion page, but the New York Times is obviously selective about what it chooses to put on its opinion page. It's not like they're just, taking all comers. They select things, they assign things to people. I've written many opinion pieces. I pitch it and the place accepts it or they don't. The New York Times does not publish opinion pieces talking about, crop circles or things that people know are obviously stupid and, or, not important. But they have decided that it is very important for these people to be heard and for this issue to be pushed multiple times a week. For these people, no one needs that many op-eds from these people. They don't. It's not like they're, that varied. They all have the exact same opinions. They all have the same takes, the same things they think are big gotchas, and they are not. There's no reason other than having a particular agenda to keep running these pieces.
Well, yeah, and they used to do, I would say, have the decency, and I say that, with smart quotes, the decency to find a Black conservative or a right-wing woman to defend Trump or whoever against accusations of racism or sexism. The idea of having someone who's not even a member of the marginalized group to defend someone is just, to me, absurd. It's such a clear sense of, we don't even respect you as part of the dialogue to find someone to address this issue, perhaps because they can't find someone. I mean, I think
that would be a very awkward call for work.
Well, I mean, clearly they are. I mean,
how self-hating are you?
Well, I mean, these people exist. Candace Owens makes a fortune doing this, and they can find people to, like, hey, I think police brutality is a great thing. It's great that Black guy got shot. Like, they usually find someone. They don't. I mean, and yes, they've run Poor Us cop posts from cops, sure. So maybe this is part of more of the same of, you know, poor us trans women. There is this, and if you saw this, I'm gonna play this from Charlie
People
Kirk.
are sick, and I don't say that lightly. The NCAA is a perverted organization. They platformed a biological male who won a national championship and then was allowed in incredibly disturbing detail to be around you and your fellow competitors. And again, I blame the decline of American men. This never should have been, you know, someone should have just took care of it the way we used to take care of things in the 1950s or 60s. But, you know, as you have testosterone rates go down and men start acting like women and they don't do anything, then, hey, who's to say? You're going to look, there are a lot of sick people in the world, unfortunately, and without the strength to go against them, the country is going to completely.
Hey, you remember back in the good old days when we could just murder someone?
Yes, perhaps the sick person. Perhaps the sick person is someone who thinks that we should lynch trans women because they are competitive in women's sports. Because that's the issue. It's sort of like, it's not sort of, we'll allow you to play, but if you actually do well, then that's clearly because of some unfair advantage you have, and woe is us, we should now kill you, which is not.
I mean, people should actually look into it, because the hormones that people get are for these sorts of things do decrease muscle mass. They decrease a lot of things. And the thing is, this is not a debate that has been, this is a debate that has been going on far longer than trans people have existed, or not existed. There's been an issue with, you know, trans people doing sports. Caster Semenya is a biological woman, but, you know, she has she has chromosomal issues, and so she has more testosterone than the average woman does. And, you know, she's an Olympic runner. And the way that they do it in the Olympics is they actually just like test the level of hormones and, you know, estrogen versus testosterone in your blood, and that determines whether or not you can compete. And, you know, a lot of the time there are people who are taking these hormones who are going to, you know, have more estrogen. They're going to have more estrogen than testosterone. And those things have effects on people's bodies. They're the ones, honestly, who are, you know, talking about, oh my God, these hormones are irreversible. They're not always irreversible, but so they realize on some level that, you know, there are effects to the human body from these hormones and from other intercessions. But then they're like, oh, but sports, they actually retain all of their muscle mass and, you know, various other abilities that I guess come with being a man. I don't know. I am not a man, so I don't, and I'm not good at sports. So,
well, I mean, the historical pattern's the same. Again, if this out group, we don't consider fully part of us, as it was in the pre-Jackie Robinson Black people. If they compete, it's going to be unfair. It's going to be icky because I don't want them I don't want them in the locker room with me, and it's unfair to, you know, have to interact with them. I mean, it's all been a pattern. I mean, this bigotry has a pattern. Again, as you said, it's been,
and bathrooms are always involved somehow. They
are leveraging white womanhood and essentially the threat, which is the core of bigotry, just that the male presence itself means that this pervert is going to attack women, despite there's zero evidence of this. So they try to argue two things at once, that these trans women are going to assault other women in the locker room, and they have an unfair advantage against those poor women who just want to compete in sports, and they could win. And this woman in the clip, I'm not going to bother identifying because she's just annoying, but she sort of has been going everywhere whining about how she is, which is sort of, I'm sorry, with all respect to white women, is sort of, there's sort of a level of mediocre white woman who has been complaining about this. There's one lady in Texas who was complaining about the affirmative action in college admissions costing her rightful place. So this is sort of a constant sort of, any fair treatment of marginalized groups is unfair to me, inherently so, and it's just ridiculous. But when this guy's talking about literally killing women in the same week that a woman, again, a trans girl, actually was murdered, is pretty repulsive. And you caught.
We do miss those days.
Oh yeah,
they absolutely. Of course, they miss those days. Those were great times for them.
But and Kirk never lived during those days, so he's not some boomer who recalls these glory days, or even, I don't even know if his father would recall these glory days. So it's really these men who have a fantasy, they have a glorified image of what the past would have been for them, and feel lost in this current world where they they obviously are, their mediocrity is so apparent. He also does the same thing, which is just that there is this gender essentialism, yet men like Kirk, and I've seen this with Matt Walsh, will say, you're not a full man if you behave these ways.
Oh, absolutely.
So the magazine cover with the pop star Rihanna, with her
oh God, yeah.
walking ahead while she has her very lucky partner holding the baby, and everyone's just like, oh no, he's being emasculated. There's Jonathan Majors, who was in the #1 film of this weekend, Ant-Man Quantumania. He plays the villain Kang, and he's also going to be in Creed 3, and he's like, essentially 100% muscle or something like that, but he's on the cover of Essence magazine, I believe, or maybe Ebony, I'm sorry, but he's wearing what some men believe they called effeminate clothing, and they said he's being emasculated. It's like, well, how can he? Like, what does that even mean? He's obviously a man. And this sort of fear of manhood is just so absurd, and that's existed for a while, but you're sort of having that at the same time as this sort of gender essentialism, which is just that you can't become, what was it you'd written about? I think like someone making the claim about how if you look at one of those old Pizza Huts, and it's obviously not an old Pizza Hut anymore, but you can tell it used to be a Pizza Hut, and that's what a true person is, which is of course incredibly offensive. But it's this idea that you can't change who you are, yet they will also complain that a man is being less of a man, or a woman is being less of a woman. It's like, well, obviously you're having conflicting thoughts, but bigots are not known for their intellectual consistency, I suppose.
No, that cover was a really big deal in the manosphere over the weekend. There were several people who I'm not going to mention by name, because they are, this one man is trying desperately to be a fame whore, and it's very sad. Trying to do all these diagrams of the Vogue cover, showing that, oh, see, her face looks masculine, which it does not. Rihanna's fucking gorgeous. And she looks unhappy. Do you see how she's unhappy? Because she would be so much happier with like gender roles reversed. And if you have a man leaning towards a woman in a picture, then that is, the destruction of his manhood. If he is carrying the baby, that's the destruction of his manhood. And it's fucking ridiculous. Yeah. Keep the diagonal green lines. And the way that they present this as this incredible truth, and, they have all of these other men, doing their own diagrams of these pictures and, being like, oh, yes, this is absolutely correct. And none of these people have ever lived in a time where, they've gotten to be I guess, superior. They've never experienced that. So it all very much exists in their imaginations. And in their imaginations, all of these various things combine to make a world where, you know, in their mind, ASAP Rocky is, you know, walking 12 feet behind Rihanna because he is submissive to her, which, you know, she could be into. She, you know, I think she goes either way with that. But, you know, they so crave this world that they've never been able to live in, largely because they feel irrelevant right now. And the thing is, even if they lived at that point, they would probably still have to do something to be important or to be, you know, treated the way that they believe that they are supposed to be treated. But instead, they blame it on other people getting equal rights, getting equality, getting, you know, treated well, getting to walk in front, not having to carry the baby. Like, it's all these various things, and they, in their minds, this is the perfect world, and it absolutely would not be. They just are very unhappy people.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of, and especially when someone like Ben Shapiro is promoting that, and he would, by these sort of standards, would not essentially do very well.
No.
So
he's a very small man. Like, which is, I'm Italian. I'm fine with men being short. Like, I don't care if men are shorter than I am. I'm 5'8". It's gonna happen. But like, he is a very small man. He does not fit into any one's idea of like the Charles Atlas ideal. In just 7 days, no one is making Ben Shapiro a, you know, buff beach dude. Like, and that's fine. No one, people do not have to be that. But if you're not, you know, you should recognize when something clearly would not actually benefit you.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with the Chris Rock routine about how bullying is necessary. It makes boys better or so forth. But I will say that Ben Shapiro does present as someone who did not attend my high school, or work like a school where not that you deserve bullying, but like he's in a world of where no one ever essentially said you're full of crap. and like,
no, I'm pretty sure he did, and that probably motivated him to be more full of crap. I knew a bunch of Ben Shapiros growing up, and they got it occasionally, but for the most part they dished it out. And, you know, it did not seem to affect them that much. No. Also, I don't think that kids who are bullied generally like get some sort of sense of humbleness or anything like that beaten into them. They just feel like shit. And then sometimes like, I was an asshole for a very long time in certain ways before I dealt with some things. Like, I just assumed everyone who was talking to me was making fun of me. And that caused me to be an asshole. I don't think that bullying does anything effective at all to anyone. It does not help.
The weaponization of bullying as well, so that the marginalized are called bullies if they push back. So and the Times kind of promoted that. So the idea is that the bullies are the employees who won't sit down and shut up, and they're being unfair to the writers and reporters who are promoting very dangerous rhetoric.
Yeah. They've been really trying to push that narrative that, you know, oh my God, these feminists are being bullied by trans people who don't like it when you tell them that they don't really qualify as human beings or women or whatever. They're like, you know, oh, I'm getting all these death threats and everything. Everyone on the internet gets death threats. That is how being on the internet works. It's unfortunate, but it's true. I've gotten death threats over Morgellons, okay? People are very defensive about their like lint things, but you know, trying to pour they go very, very much overboard in an effort to present themselves as the real victims of oppression. Oh, we can't talk, we can't share our opinions. Most people cannot share their opinions about things that are terrible. Like, you know, yes, you can have an unpopular opinion about a movie, whatever. But if you're going around saying, you know, oh, I hate all Black people, people are probably going to tell you to shut up, or they're going to avoid you and not listen to you. Or, you know, it's not saying asshole things and not getting a pass on them is not oppression. Saying an asshole thing and someone saying, hey, you're an asshole is not a form of oppression. It never will be. Actually, speaking of bullying, when I was a kid, one of the things that happened quite often was that these kids would say horrible things to me. There was a whole giant issue going on where they wanted to use a particular racial slur, and I kept the W word with the racial slur for Black people attached. They really wanted to use it all the time. And I was like, hey, that is maybe a bad term to use. And then they started using the real term. And the teachers kept telling me, oh, no, that's their free speech. They can say that. Because I went to a horrible school. But the thing is, the people who are like this are always going to try and present themselves as being oppressed in some way. White people in the South tried to portray themselves as being victimized by Black people and Northerners. If you watch there's a video that is really upsetting to watch. Sorry, the guy with the chicken restaurant. He's mentioned in the beginning of that one Randy Newman song. Someone can tell me, Lester Maddox. There's a video of him going after these people with a baseball bat, holding his baseball bat up. And absolutely, in his mind, he is the victim. He's like, I'm not going to, I'll close my restaurant. These people want to destroy my life and my way of living. And, you know, it's one of the more disturbing videos I've ever seen. It is on YouTube. And he, in his mind, he is absolutely the victim. He is. The people who are trying to do the oppressing will never present themselves. Oh, sorry, axe handle. I did not live during that era. I thought it was a baseball bat. But there's never been a point where people who are doing the oppressing of any kind do not present themselves as the real victims. With immigration, it's like, oh, they're not sending their best. They're all criminals and rapists. And that's been the case with every single wave of immigration we've seen so far. Even with feminism in the early days, it was women who were going to be the victim of feminism because then they were going to get bicycle faced and be driven from the home and be all sad and, you know, because they wouldn't have their husbands to take care of themselves and take care of them anymore. Most of the people who were writing op-eds against suffrage were women, saying like, this will make me feel unsafe. I need my man to vote for me. There's never been an oppressive movement really where people are like, we are actually the bullies and we just hate these people. Like that's never been, Hitler didn't do that. In Germany, it was, oh, the Jewish people are a threat to us. It's always that people are a threat.
And the boycott historically has been seen as the mob attacking people unfairly. I know
because boycotts are the only thing that works.
And for those who have been boycotting Rowling, it's fascinating because, again, this is an example of the Times sort of presenting this as if Rowling is losing anything from these boycotts. I'm not going to argue the pros and cons of a boycott against Harry Potter work in general. That's kind of a very long discussion. It's more just that it is obviously not going to bankrupt J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
And yet they are sort of presenting it as this woke mob is attacking her and her freedom of speech. And, you know, whereas in many cases,
by using their freedom of speech to criticize her.
Oh, yes. And a boycott, like, if you as a public figure who's very much associated with something makes a point of actively alienating, there will be a response. There's no world. I mean, Christians burned Beatles records because John Lennon just made a comment in jest about being bigger than Jesus. He never actually said everyone who's a Christian should not exist. It was more of just, we are more popular than Jesus right now. And even that was sort of taken out of context of sort of making a sense of like, yes, people probably were more excited to go see a Beatles concert than to go to church or something. Yeah. So, but there is that sense of, so Jessie Gender is a very great YouTuber who I enjoy. People should go and follow her, who are into Star Trek and stuff like Rowling. One of the tragedies is a lot of marginalized people historically have sought out fantasy and fiction for for perhaps obvious reasons, right? And so it's not just that Rowling, it's that Rowling is actually someone who these people kind of grew up work loving.
It felt like a betrayal in a lot of ways, I think. You know, people grew up loving these books and feeling like, you know, it was it was major escapism. I absolutely loved Harry Potter. I initially bought it for my sister because I thought it would encourage her to read more fiction. And I read all of them myself when she was like, absolutely not, please get it out of my face now. My sister is very smart. She just does not like fantasy or anything like that. But yeah, no, she did not respond well to that, although she likes the soundtracks. You know, that was a very big, you know, I don't want to say part of my life, but it was, you know, of course I liked those movies. Of course I liked the books. And, you know, there's this thing downtown, I don't know if it's still going on, that was like, you know, some sort of like magical Harry Potter world that's taking over the Water Tower building because all of the businesses left in Chicago, that building, in that particular building. And I would have loved that a few years back. I would have been first in line for tickets for that. And it's not that it's less of a boycott than I don't even fucking want it anymore. Like, like I don't even, it sucks the joy out of it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the saddest thing.
I think, and Jessie Gender had gone into detail and being very, of why this was difficult for her, why she felt that supporting Rowling was hurtful to trans people. She was expressing her opinion. Of course, Rowling kind of called out Jessie Gender. Rowling has a far larger platform, but it was essentially she took, again, victimized of like, you know, obviously you can't like me, and obviously, you know, you have to join the mob in not liking me, was sort of her response and so forth. And you know, which sending some a lot of hatred towards Jessie Gender.
I mean, who is the mob here?
Well, yeah,
there's not just one mob.
Well, and to bring this back to sort of the title of this chat before we leave, I mean, as you said, no one thinks they are the villain. So in Rowling's mind, she sees the trans community as Dolores Umbridge forcing Harry Potter to write in his own blood, "I will not tell lies," because she believes she's telling the truth. She's out there telling the truth about Voldemort, which is that, you know, about trans women invading these spaces. She's telling the truth, and the trans community is the oppressive community that is saying, we're going to ignore this reality, we're going to ignore this threat, and you're telling lies. That's how she sees it. So, you know, she sees herself as the hero, And so if someone were to challenge her and say, this seems a betrayal, I thought that you were on the side of you, why are you on the side of the bad guys? She would not see it that way. And I think that is always a challenge when dealing with bigots. They sort of see themselves as the heroes of their own stories. So I think that's, we're almost at time. I think, do you have any other comments before we go regarding thoughts about what is going on with the Times and their shutdown of free speech from their own employers?
I mean, what I will say is it's a really scary time to be doing anything like that because, like, specifically because of all the layoffs in media, like, you know, making it scary to try and speak out to keep your job in an environment where it's going to be difficult to get hired because every place is, you know, having mass layoffs. There's an extra layer of cruelty to that, to me, I think, because it's basically like, well, you have nowhere else to go. Suck it up. And that does add an extra layer of also, quick discussion, because I do think it's a similar thing. Roseanne released her comedy special, which is the least funny thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's like it's not even, there aren't even
reality. They've been living in a bubble forever. Asking questions have nothing to do with the real world. What is my gender, Mom? What is my gender? Your gender is get a job. That's your gender. What are they thinking? Ask what is a woman? They don't know that. That one they're asking all the time, what is a woman? I'll tell you what a woman is. A woman is me. That's what a woman is, okay? A woman is someone who cleans up everybody else's. That's what a woman is. A woman is somebody whose boobs hang down to her knees with a prolapsed uterus from giving birth to 5 ungrateful little privileged never had to work for anything in their whole damn life. My pronouns are kiss my
So I can't imagine I can't understand why you would say there were no jokes there.
Well, okay, that is absolutely what I will tell you. That is the most joke-filled segment. It keeps going around. The rest of it is like a QAnon TED Talk. It's like she's just like, people in my family are taking the vaccine and probably all gonna die. They all have blood clot sickness, which is not blood clot. I mean, blood clots are a thing. Blood clot sickness, I don't even know. One thing that does bother me about that particular bit, though, is that Roseanne wasn't too nice to her kids, at least one of them, who she basically kept going from mental institutions to fat camps to whatever they called it, like the teen, out of control teen woodsy experiences and what have you. I know there's a term for it. I don't even know. Boot camp. And to the point where she was like legitimately traumatized by it. Also, Roseanne lied about her parents molesting her. Not lied. She came out in 1991 and said that she was the victim of incest, that her parents molested her, that her father molested her until she was 17, and she had discovered this in therapy because it was recovered memories. And this was I do believe the people that this happened to were victims. I do believe that she was a victim, but she also very much came forward publicly and said that her dad was naked chasing her around with poop, which, as it turns out, did not happen. And then several decades later, casually walked it back. It wasn't actually sexually abused, but there was some psychological stuff there maybe. But, her father died without him ever hearing her retraction, which is pretty horrible. It just, way to talk about ungrateful children there. But I grew up loving Roseanne. Like, the woman was my absolute hero. I defended everything she did to everyone in middle school, or like elementary school era, I think. She grabbed her crotch at baseball games. I was like, yes, this is fantastic. Fuck all of you. People would make fun of her voice. I was there for her, and it is the biggest betrayal. And I can't even enjoy old episodes of Roseanne anymore. And that, it's sad. It's sad. It's not, because it's not even a boycott thing. It's you just feel so disgusted that it's no longer it ruins the good time that it could be. It's like when you're in a bar and they start playing Ignition and you're like, oh no, this is not right. And it's not, it's just, you get the disgust factor. And I hate that I now sort of get I do get the disgust factor with Roseanne. And yes, I love her as the woman Roseanne used to be, or I love She-Devil or Roseanne Connor, who knows? But these people keep talking about, oh, we've been canceled. Oh, it's cancel culture. It's not that. It's like when you disgust people, when you are mean, when you start saying horrible things about other people, it's like your art becomes, people skeeve it. People don't want to laugh along with you. They don't want to have anything to do with you. And that's very different from an organized boycott, which, again, is the only effective way to get anything done. No one's getting anything done by boycotting J.K. Rowling. No one's getting anything done by boycotting Roseanne, or that's not even a thing that anyone can do because she's not doing anything other than unfunny stand-up specials. It's just, you end up skeeving people out, and that is the risk that you take when you say asshole things. So.
Yeah, and J.K. Rowling, the injured party are trans people. Marco Rubio has trying to push a trans ban in the military again against, unless you serve, trans people can serve as long as they serve under their biological sex, which is to essentially a trans ban. And so that's the stuff that should be reported on and called out, rather than apparently helping promote a bigoted narrative and woe is me stuff for billionaires like J.K. Rowling, who is not going to suffer if Jessie Gender she won't even notice. She's not going to notice. Most trans people are not a lot of people, which is what's so crazy about this intense focus, as the letter calls out. And so she's not going to notice if these people don't buy more of her stuff or her video game or whatever. But these are people who are letting go of something that was special to them. They are the sort of victims here, not Rowling. So, well, thank you all for joining us today. As always, remember to like, share, subscribe. We will be back again next week. You say goodbye to the nice folks, Robin.
Goodbye.